Welcome to another edition of Living with Purpose. As you know, we've been doing these recordings over the last year and a half, but in addition to Living with Purpose podcast, we also have our Living with Purpose book series. The first edition was released last November, so please check it out on Amazon. And we are now working on edition number two. And if you're interested in being part of both the podcast and the book, please do reach out. But today I have a fascinating guest, Keri-Lynne Shaw. She actually teaches you how you don't leave any money on the table as you are part of your job search or in a job. Essentially, she really looks at you from what you have to offer and how you can actually think about financial analysis that she does with you. So, with that, please join me in welcoming Keri-Lynne.
Thank you. Gosh, wow. Thank you. Fascinating. I don't know if anyone has ever introduced me that way. Basically, just to add on to what you said, I help people stop treating their career like a job and treat it like the biggest financial asset that it is, in
And
short.
I'm hoping that we will talk a little bit more about that as you get into it. So let's start off by actually just talking about you growing up, your childhood, your family, your background, and then we'll slowly move into what you're doing now.
I love it. Well, I grew up in Western Canada, probably the most northern city that people are populated because it's extremely cold. So we grew
Where
up,
is the city?
it's Edmonton, Alberta.
All right.
Yes. So I left as soon as I could, not because I didn't have an amazing childhood, an amazing family, but I was dropped in the wrong place. I am a Pisces. I belong in the water. But I went to Arizona, closest thing I could get. And I went from the most extreme cold to the most extreme heat and loved that 3 years. There was just something so special about that time. But I mean, I get back to Canada often. Of course, my parents are there, my family is there.
So, talk a little bit about just growing up, right? Edmonton, your family, what do your parents do? Are you the only child? What kind of childhood did you have?
Yeah, I'd say a pretty simple one. I have an older brother, 4 years older, so quite far in age. So I feel like we kind of lived separate lives in a way. He was a big sports guy, and so we've followed him around playing hockey and soccer most of my life. But my parents both worked. So if I think about how that impacted me now as an adult, it taught me so much about work ethic. I remember being quite sick as a child, and I would want to go and sleep in my mom's bedroom and or sleep in their bed, and she would always say, "No, you can lay next to me on the floor because I have to get up for work tomorrow and I need my rest." And I don't think that I don't think I realized at the time how that was going to stay with me from a work ethics perspective. But my dad owned a company, which also was interesting. So my entrepreneurial spirit, which I also didn't know I was going to have in my 50s, or being an entrepreneur, I would say I always had a spirit. My mom had sort of more of a safe job, worked for the government, and my dad started a company a little bit later in life with three friends and ended up selling that and retiring actually quite early. I think he was in his early 50s. And yeah, it was, I think the one thing that is most memorable for me is the way that they were a team, because back in the day, I'm 54. In that time, women couldn't get their own mortgage or even their own credit card, or it was just starting to happen. And they were such a team financially, and they always kept separate accounts, which I thought was really interesting. So there was no, I don't ever remember an argument about money. It just they showed up together as a team, which I so respect.
So you went to school there, I'm assuming in Edmonton,
I did,
and
but I
you
but I
did all
quit.
your schooling in Edmonton, and then you decided that you wanted to move away.
No, I quit school.
Okay.
7 classes shy of getting my special education degree. I realized I did not want to be a teacher. And so I ended up moving to the US in a long sort of way, ended up finishing my degree. I ended up getting then a marketing degree and then further got my MBA. But the rest of it was done in the US. And so all, amazing certifications and things that I did around the world after that. But I wasn't a studious person. School didn't excite me. School actually pained me. Work was more exciting for me. So I worked three jobs, put myself through school, and I preferred the work over that. And so when I quit, it was like such a freeing experience. My parents didn't have anything to say about it because I paid for my own, but I ended up going all the way later in life. But it was not your normal traditional path of 4 years of school and yeah, off you go into your corporate world.
So, so what made you decide to move from Edmonton to Arizona? So I'm assuming you kind of came to Arizona State or Arizona University, one of the two. And why did you pick that?
I didn't go for school. I followed a boy.
Okay,
If I'm
good. That's
being
even more fun.
totally honest, yes. And he was a car dealer actually, a used car dealer. And so I sold cars to pay for college and did other jobs as well. But it was that time when we ended up establishing a business in Scottsdale, Arizona, that was probably the most interesting 6 months. School of entrepreneurship. My visa, I didn't have a visa right away, so I was only able to be there and not work. And then when my visa came through, I left the boy and I moved on and did some, did my own thing. But I learned a lot about being an entrepreneur and how hard it is to build a company and build a business and what it takes. So it was this really interesting experience. And the reason I went back to school was because I was doing marketing events. I was working for big automotive manufacturers, Porsche and BMW. And I met a guy at this event and he was like, well, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I want to get into corporate because at these events, the corporate employees would show up and they were so interesting to me. And I thought, that's what I want to do. And he said, well, why don't you come work for us? And I said, well, who do you work for? And he said, GM. I didn't even know what GM stood for at the time. I'm being really true. I was like Googling. We didn't barely
Yeah.
had Google back then. I Googled what GM, oh, General Motors. Okay, well, it's not BMW, it was which was my dream company or Porsche. But interesting, because I sent him my resume and he wrote me back and said, unfortunately, we can't consider you because you don't have your degree. And I was like, heck no. So I pried that door back open. I signed up, got all my transfer credits down to the US, and I signed up for school. And I said, I think you would be making a big mistake by not hiring me. I'm registered. I will finish my degree, and you can mold me and shape me in that 2 years or however long it took me then. And they flew me to New York before I got on the plane. They had offered me the job. It was one of those moments where I just felt so defeated, but I am not the kind of person that ever gets knocked down. I get right back up again. That was the best decision that I made was to work there for 5 years. Had a 5-year goal to work for BMW and accomplished that, and then had a wonderful career with BMW.
So you get to New York, and was the job in New York or was it in Detroit? Where were
Yes,
you
it
working?
was in New York. It was in the regional office in Purchase, New York. Yeah.
Okay, so you worked for GM for 5 years, and then how did you move out of that to BMW?
So that was an early day where they had jobs posted online, and it was really new at the time. And there was a job for European delivery, a European delivery manager. I worked for BMW on the events side before, so with an events company, and I knew about the European delivery program, and I thought this is the perfect job for me. Perfect job for me. I applied, got the job, and then through BMW, really that 12 years changed my life. From every job I could have imagined, I said yes to every opportunity. I said yes to every project. I ran where the fires were because I wanted to be really solving complex and big problems, and ended up leaving as the head of HR there.
Let's step back a little bit. Just there's so many different things that you've said, right? So first, European delivery. Talk a little bit about what is European delivery. This is where people go to Europe to buy the BMW cars, pick it up there, drive around Europe, and then get the car shipped, correct?
The only correction is they buy their car at their local dealer in the US.
Correct,
At that
correct,
time, there was a 7% savings, which paid for your trip.
correct.
And in the time I was there, we were able to double sales. And I was so proud of what we accomplished. So diplomatic sales and European delivery. But yeah, you get to drive it around on the streets where, by the way, it was meant to be driven, not in the US. It was meant to be driven on the Autobahn. And what was interesting about that was there was so many challenges that happened with people going overseas and not having their passports or their passports were about to expire and they got stopped and had to get sent home, or cars were on their way back on a boat and one car unlocked from the chains and the whole journey coming across the Atlantic, the car flew around and damaged every car on that floor,
Oh my
to
God.
people dropping their car off and no one being there to pick up their car and they needed to leave it somewhere and get to the airport, to cars breaking down on the Autobahn, to the most unique things in every situation. When it was a full moon, there was always something wild that happened. But the amount of client customer situations that I had to solve in that job, it gave me this ability, I guess you could say, to be able to solve any situation. Some of these were really serious situations, could be life or death situations. And I didn't realize how that would shape me also as a human, and how that, would take me to the C-suite as a result.
So that's so fascinating and so interesting to hear. I've been driving BMWs,
Oh, thank
and
you.
my son also loves BMWs, but we now neither one of us has a BMW because I generally now just
Oh,
use the bus. But
we have
that's a
to
whole different.
change that. We have to change that. I have a beautiful pension from there. So does my husband. So thank you for being a longtime customer.
Yeah, my son moved to London and he's not buying a car. He lives in
Okay.
London. So it's like, oh, but coming back to this, you said something very fascinating, and I completely swear by it. So I want you to talk a little bit more about this notion of saying yes. Most people are trained to say no to protect their time, and I actually say yes, because
Mhm.
by saying yes, opportunities open up. So talk a little bit about this. Why did you believe at that early age to say yes?
I had no idea what I was doing. I said yes because I'm a learner. I just took every opportunity as an opportunity to grow, but also to get exposure, because I didn't know what a C-suite was. I knew what a president or a vice president was, and I knew that I wanted to keep to grow in my career, not knowing where it would ever take me. But I felt like philosophically, if I did good work back in those days, if I showed up before everyone else and left before everyone else, left after everyone else, that was unfortunately one of the signs of hard work. And they didn't always look at results, but that was a sign. And that's where the old school that I grew up in. And the saying yes was, again, it wasn't even so prescribed. I just felt like I wanted to be where the action was. I wanted to be where things were happening. I will be honest, I was definitely a people pleaser a lot of my life, and I've really worked on that as a 54-year-old woman, in letting go some of that. But so some of it was for validation and for
Right.
recognition, but it was for my learning and my growth. And I loved seeing the whole picture, because if I could see what was around these corners, it would help me in my role to have that bigger picture, to understand what the things were that were keeping the executives up at night. So I would ask those questions, and I inherently just created this beautiful network that I didn't actually really even know I was doing. And now understanding that 80% of jobs are found via networking. And wow, I was so grateful that I did that. So I wanted, like, so a little bit was exposure. What were people saying about me in rooms that I wasn't in? And my mantra has changed a little bit, that if it's not a heck yes, it's a no. And really understanding how my body is showing up energetically when it's something that I really want to do, versus how my body reacts when it's something that I don't really want to do, but I feel like I should say yes. So this is still a muscle that I'm
Mm.
building and learning, but I think saying yes was one of the best things that I could have done for my life, without fear of failure. Just, I'm going for it. I am going for it and I'll figure it out. That was always what I did, and I always figured it out. So I had a track record to lean back on, but I was fearless.
What is so fascinating is this connection between saying yes and being fearless. Yes kind of gives you that power. And yes, at times it may look like you are being a pleaser, but in most cases, it actually gives you empowerment by
Mhm.
saying yes. And I want our listeners to kind of distinguish between the two. of saying yes to please somebody else and saying yes because it actually empowers you to show up the way you want to show up. And it's a big difference between the two. So Keri-Lynne, thank you so much for talking about that. So let's continue on that journey. So BMW, and then you moved to Germany.
I moved to Germany as an expat with BMW. That was, I would say, one of the four biggest transformations of my life. That time, I came home with a herniated disc. I put more pressure on myself than I probably have ever put on myself. And I went there not knowing the language. And everybody's saying, don't worry, everybody speaks English. Well, they do, but not in the business setting. And I had 6 months to sell a really critical project, which touched every single person in the company. I was like, whatever, I'm saying yes. I didn't even think about the politics. I didn't think about what this project was going to be. I just went for it. And whew, it was one of my toughest career moves. Super successful, ended up being a project that the CEO touted as one of the best HR projects that had been delivered, and that was so meaningful, especially knowing how hard it was for me to navigate highly political environment, navigate. Okay, Canadians are known for saying sorry a lot, and Germans are
Yeah,
probably a little bit more on the direct side,
yeah.
and that was a very big difference from how I was raised and just how I showed up. So I had to learn also how to have conversations differently, that they don't always have to be hard conversations, but to be more direct and stop beating around the bush and putting flowers around it, the sandwich effect. So I learned a ton about myself. And it was interesting when I say the herniated disc, the reason why that's important is because the moment I landed, they brought me back a year into my expat assignment for my dream job at the time.
Yeah.
And the moment I landed, I remember it so distinctly, January 1st, I was this close to having an emergency surgery on my disc, on my back.
Hmm.
And the moment I landed, disappeared,
Hmm.
gone. And I've never had a problem since. So I learned a lot about my body, about stress, about speaking my voice, how you navigate challenging times. So, it was an important lesson in my journey of learning as I see everything that happens in our life, the
Hmm.
really difficult things, the beautiful things. And this was one that taught me a lot about boundaries and how I need to care for myself in a different way.
So did you just spend a year in Germany, or then did you go
It was
back?
about a year and a half, and
Okay.
then yeah, ultimately we plan to go back because my husband is German and works for BMW, and we built a life together. And Germany is really a big part of that life.
So you've now been back from Germany for 20 plus years, right?
2012 is when we got, I think it was 2012. 2012 is when we got back. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's been a while.
been a while.
But you still work for BMW at that time.
I worked for BMW at the time, but having your husband work in the same company when you became the head of HR proved to be not maybe the best scenario.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't want to impact his career, and in a negative way, potentially, perception. So a recruiter reached out, and I decided to say yes to a new opportunity in a new industry, and it was a fantastic opportunity that was not a values wasn't a fit from a
Hmm.
values perspective. And I ended up leaving that job for the first time in my life, not having another job lined up. And I told my husband I'm taking 6 months to go find myself, to find my purpose. First thing I did was fly to India and do an Ayurveda retreat for 3 weeks, and they solved my migraines, anything that was left in my back. And India has now become an annual self-care that I do. I just got back actually. Um,
Where were you?
I go to Kerala.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have clients there actually who I got to meet in person on my way back from into Mumbai. So India has a very special place in my heart. One of my other big transformations, my second big transformation in my life. And yeah, I will always incorporate it from a health perspective, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, just fantastic. My wife, she has a Ayurvedic and CBD product for pain, and she actually does pain management work. But that's a whole different story.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's so fascinating.
Yeah,
I so believe in Eastern medicine and just how we care for ourselves holistically. Yeah.
yeah,
What we put into our bodies mostly is coming from here. Yeah.
exactly. So you kind of talked about your two big transformations that have happened to you. So you
Yeah.
got two more to go.
Two more to
So
go.
talk about so you've gone went to discover yourself and you
Yeah.
came back and then what?
So, one of those transformations is actually in the past, 20 years ago. We can come back to that one. I left, I really discovered my purpose, and my purpose was to be in HR. So, I was in sales and marketing for 20 years. I
Yeah.
had no idea how to spell HR. It was not in my trajectory, did not ever interact with HR. So, about a decade that I had was in HR. And I realized that this is where I belong and that helping people unlock their potential is my purpose. So I ended up becoming a chief people officer in a few different companies then after that. It was when I left a company as a chief people officer, I was interviewing for my next role and I kept coming in second. I'm like, okay, I don't like the silver medal quite as much as the gold. I realized that I wanted to start a company. I looked inside and I asked myself, what are you really good at? What do you really love? And how do you want to make an impact on the world? So framing my ikigai. And it's actually an exercise I do with every single client. And I realized that I love negotiation. I love helping people see behind the curtain of HR, which is actually quite a dark unknown for a
Yes.
lot of
Yeah.
people. And I have this ability through my own mistakes of negotiating, through watching really, really great people negotiate, smart people negotiate. So I was able to go through this process of, sorry, somebody's at the door. This is, yeah, I can't come right now. So I documented what proper negotiation looks like and how I can share that with people. I knew I was good at it. I knew I loved helping people find their way. And the impact and mission that I'm on is to close the generational pay gap. It's desperately needed. Unfortunately, it's gone backwards the last 2 years, and I am doing everything I can to help guide people in this way. And so I built a company as a result, and it's been absolutely a journey. I talked about that early entrepreneur journey moving to Arizona. Wow, I didn't realize that that would come in handy. I think I was 51 when I decided to do this and sort of blow up my life in a really interesting way and think about what it is that truly brings me joy and how I can touch the world with my gifts.
Why did you use the word joy and not happiness?
I don't know. I had a happiness expert on my TV show. So I have a TV show called Job Hunt New York. And she talked about happiness, and I said, happiness is a choice. And she didn't agree. Why did I use joy? I don't know. Joy has deeper meaning. Joy yeah, I can't answer that question.
And the reason I ask is because I fundamentally believe in joy. I don't believe in happiness
Mm,
because I believe that happiness is a singular individual pursuit where you can be happy and I can be sad and we can be sitting next to each other and you would
yeah,
neither one of us would know the difference.
yeah.
But joy is a collective endeavor.
It's it's
It comes from
deeper.
deeper and
Mm,
you cannot experience joy without somebody else. So I was just so thrilled that you use the word that it gives you joy in doing what you're doing because you are actually not just doing it for yourself.
yeah.
You're doing it because it adds value to somebody that you're working with. And it's actually life transformational in many cases for these people.
You know, it's funny you say that. So thank you for that. My clients will say to me, first of all, there's two things they say to me. 95% of the time, where were you 5 years ago? Where were you 6 months ago? Where were you my whole life? It's
Yeah,
95% of people that meet me ask me that because every one of us has left money on the table.
correct.
And every one of them will say, KL, I had no idea that this was going to be life transforming, not just transforming my career.
Yeah,
I think people underestimate the choices they make for the work that they do and how that impacts the joy in their life and how that impacts
exactly.
them in ways when you are disconnected from your gifts, from what you're good at, and how you want to show up in this world. I think people sometimes think they have to wear a mask or they have to separate those two parts of their life. And that's the work that I get to do is to help people get aligned and not only, of course, the money is important because we have generational wealth we want to create, we have goals, we have retirement goals, we have financial goals. And I help people to understand their relationship to money, which has also been a really interesting part of
Mm,
this because
yeah,
you can't advocate for yourself or show up for a negotiation if you haven't reconciled your own limiting beliefs around money, scarcity, guilt,
yeah.
shame, filth, right? What is your feeling about money? I've had to work on my own. And these are things you work on an ongoing basis. And it's really fascinating. So once we unpack that, we're able to then show up differently for the interview, show up differently when someone asks you, tell me about yourself, and you're not just regurgitating your resume, that you're actually really answering who you are and you're showing your energy and your love and zest for life. It's not just a job.
So let's talk about your earlier transformation that you had.
It happens to be a sad one. I lost my husband when I was 33 years old. He was 33, I was 34. And I had a 3-year-old daughter at the time. And obviously, it's maybe an odd way to describe a loss like that. And at the time, I certainly wouldn't have looked at it 20 years ago as a transformation. But the woman I have become as a result of that loss is a woman I'm so incredibly proud of. And I'm really proud of the life that I've built as a result. And
You,
that has transformed me in ways that I never realized that I could become. And yeah, it's an odd maybe description, and I didn't always think about it that way, but it's shaped me in big ways.
this is, I mean, again, loss can be also transformational. And in many cases, if you allow it, it can have a positive transformational impact. So you've kind of given us so much to think about. So let's have you just talk briefly about the importance of purpose and why you believe purpose is so important for you.
That is such a bold and loaded question. Having had such a loss at such a young age, I am very clear that life is short and be darned if I'm not going to live the best life I possibly can. If you, I don't, I think it's hard for people to determine and define their purpose. And I don't know if a lot of people even ask themselves that, but I think purpose is becoming partly by saying yes and putting yourself in rooms that maybe are uncomfortable. I think I don't know if maybe we have multiple purposes in this life, in this body. And I don't know if I've defined mine the right way as helping people unlock their potential, but I ask myself questions on a very regular basis, and I never will stop growing until I'm gone. And every time I grow and I ask myself something new, or I experience something new, or I put myself out there, or I meet someone like you, I meet Stephen Foster, who literally blew my mind. It was one of those like moments of how lucky am I that I get to meet these incredible people every day, that I might change their life, they might change my life. And I hope I'm living my best life. And when I get there, I'll find out if that was a match to my purpose. But I think the one thing that has really stood out for me, and the biggest thing that I've learned, is authenticity is the most powerful thing that I think maybe all of us are meant to learn. And that is taking the mask down and truly being the human that you are and that you want to be, warts and all. Your people will find you and support you and lift you up when the warts are bigger. And being vulnerable, these are the things that have changed my life. If I wore a mask every day and tried to be somebody that I wasn't, I know I wouldn't be living my purpose.
This has been such a fantastic conversation.
Thank
Just for our listeners, you guys, there's been just some unbelievably important nuggets that I want to reiterate for all of you. First, don't shy away from saying yes. Say yes. Two, make sure that a loss turns into an opportunity. Loss can become an opportunity. Three, show up with authenticity. It's the most important thing that you will ever do. And finally, it's about joy. Live a life of joy. Keri-Lynne, thank you so much for being on this podcast. This has been incredibly awesome. To all of our listeners, this has been such a wonderful conversation with such amazing nuggets that have been shared. Purpose can be transformational for you. Show up with purpose. Thank you all for listening.
you.